Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a week beginning edition of Sir Hunt on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States, on a gorgeous 70-plus degree day out here in the eastern part of Cincinnati. Lots of sun, no rain, no anything familiar with Mother Nature, and hope everyone out here is enjoying it. Hope all you guys out there, part of towns, had a wonderful rest of the week of April, a wonderful weekend, as well as a happy Easter yesterday. And hopefully everyone had themselves a wonderful 21st of April in the calendar year 2025. Lots to get to today. One of my more loaded shows I've had in quite some time. Bit of an intro before I proceed. I do this once a month because I get new people that are on tuning in. I stream live on the X, Rumble, and Facebook platforms. And the show, whatever you miss, eventually goes onto the top three audio platforms, which is Spotify, Apple, and iHeart. If you missed the video version, you can watch the video version on Spotify after the show is complete. And I hope everyone tunes into those three channels as I look to grow the platform and my particular brand on those platforms as well as the ones I'm currently on. I hope everyone has themselves a wonderful day. I'm going to go ahead and get started here real quick. You got a bug inside me. Just going to touch on some local news real quick before I get to the big ones. Shout out to FC Cincinnati. Fourth straight win over the weekend by beating Chicago Fire FC. It was, of course, the standout Evander with the 2 goals, and especially the first one early in the game was set the tone early. Got the second one later on, and of course, Kevin Denke had the go-ahead goal in the just before the end of the half, and it was a big one for FC Cincinnati. Their fourth win, unbeaten in the last 5, jumping up to the first place in the Eastern Conference in Major League Soccer. I said along when it comes to FC Cincinnati. The culture just rubs off to the city and vice versa, and they're playing pretty well. The standout Evander, 30 goals and 25 assists, the fourth fastest to get that in soccer history, which makes the acquisition they had to get him in the offseason that much more valuable as he continues to lead the charge for the particular team out here in Cincinnati. Kudos to him, and I hope they continue to go on. I look forward to being down there here soon, as well as a podcast will be there. Hopefully within the next week or two, you will see me in the particular stadium talking about some Cincinnati soccer because they have a good program going. They have a good thing going over here, and it's basically a delight to watch because right now they're the real talk of the town here in Cincinnati because they're just lighting it up. They've been that way ever since they brought the soccer to the particular city over the last several years, and it's going to be continuing and ongoing. Looking forward to talking more soccer. Kudos to Pat Noonan doing a great job over here in Cincinnati. And of course, speaking of Cincinnati, how about the Cincinnati Reds picking up a wild victory yesterday where they just did something for the first time in quite some time. Put runs on the board. Something I never thought I would live to see the day of, and that's what they were able to do when they hung 24 yesterday in Baltimore. It was basically the equivalent of an NFL score where they scored 24 and gave up a safety. But then, of course, with the Bengals offensive line, they're going to be giving up a lot of safeties. But Novale Marte, 5 for 7, a boatload of RBIs. When he's right, he's as good as it can be. But when he's not right, he resorts to PEDs, and we know what happens. Hopefully, the Reds can finally get something going because we saw what happened about a week and a half ago when they hung 14 on Texas in the 7 innings. They go 30-plus innings without scoring a run. And we know what happens there. Hopefully this time they can get this thing going and get this thing going on the right path, and we can start actually putting something together because the pitching staff has been absolutely outstanding here. We talk about basically Hunter Green, who's just been absolutely lights out, and among the many starters. So hopefully they can finally get something going, and hopefully they'll have what happened a couple weeks ago where they scored 14 runs in 7 innings on Texas, and then have that 7-plus 30-plus inning streak where they can't even get a hit or even a run. So someone tell them to bottle up their offense in a bottle and have it for the rest of the season because that offense can really cook if it really wants to cook. And they really did that yesterday. Shout out to the Reds winning the series in Baltimore. Now they're back at 500. Let's see where they go from here. They're playing in Florida against the Marlins tonight. Now we're going to touch on some college football. And at the end of whenever it's going to be, we say goodbye to an iconic figure. That's the great Lee Corso. Not so fast, my friend. Probably the greatest catchphrase of all time when you talk about talking sports and making predictions. He was real good at it. And basically, I think like within the first week of the college football season is going to be it. Of course, known for the mascot hats when he makes his predictions. He knows how to do things well. Outstanding coaching, all right. But of course, the mainstay for him was College Game Day when it started with him, Kirk Herbstreit, and Chris Fowler. Of course, when Fowler went to the commentator's booth, it went up being Reese Davis taking his place. But I always remember College Game Day for basically Chris, Kirk, and Coach. Coach being Lee Corso, knows the game inside out, probably better than anyone in the collegiate game. Showed even the last few years in his late 80s, he's still thoroughly knowledgeable to where he can make anybody look silly. I mean, he did that to Desmond Howard quite a few times in the College Game Day booth. And whatever special guests they always bring, he always gives us a view and is always very different and unique. Knows how to light up a crowd, knows how to fill that stadiums when they travel with the College Game Day crew, especially when he puts on that mask of whatever mascot he wants to wear given the game he picks. And hopefully he can just have an enjoying retirement. And he basically was a great contributor to the collegiate football game for many, many, many decades. Salute to Lee Corso. Congratulations on a terrific, terrific run, not just in the as a college coach, but also in the booth with Chris and Kirk. And speaking of more news in the college football, the big hot topic, of course, the nil on the college transfer portal, whatever the frick they want to call it, because they make a mess out of themselves. I said the biggest mistake was they rushed this too quickly, didn't even plan out all the details. Because now the kingpin of this, Nico Iamaleava, is now going to UCLA after transferring out of Tennessee because Josh Hoople decided to send him out the door because he wanted to miss practices for whatever reason. He thought he was worth $4 million. Now he's going to UCLA, and good luck with that because over there in UCLA, you're going to have high taxes, and you're going to be playing in the Big 12 where teams like your in-state rival USC, also among others like Ohio State, Michigan are licking their chops to come at you. And I wish him nothing but the best of luck because it's not going to end well for him. Because not only that, he left $2.2 million to go to university for $1.5 million. And with the taxes, who knows what the end result number is going to be, because that is going to be basically a bad backfire for him. I said all along, when it comes to this nil and transfer portal, whatever they did for the NCAA after the ruling by the Supreme Court, that they went at this a little too quickly. They didn't hash out the details well enough. And now what happens? We have everything all over the place in the collegiate game. And hopefully at some point this cleans up. And I know the college football playoff they had last season was a bit of a crux that raised eyebrows all over the place. As a longtime fan of college football who loved things the old-fashioned way, I mean, I understand why they're doing this, but it's time to get things straight and get things cleaned up because it is time to put some order in college football. I always said, one of the things that makes America great with the sports is the collegiate sports, watching these kids play so they can fulfill their dreams and go to the next level, which some cases for them is the NFL or the NBA when you talk about basketball, among all the other sports. But I wouldn't say this ruined it, but it did push it back a little bit when you talk about nil and transfer and all of that stuff. All the old school coaches have been outspoken about it, understandably so. And I said I didn't have a problem with it, just the details are missing. That needs some polishing up. They got to get to work a little bit, especially the people who run the NCAA program. They're not necessarily the sharpest tools in the shed either. Now to some more news here in Cincinnati. Once again, everybody has their panties all up in a bunch because of what came out today in the Ohio House, simply because they simply said they're not going to support the ideology of the Cincinnati Bengals wanting $350 million from the state for stadium upgrades and stadium renovations. The Bengals' value is $4 billion. They have a supposed $1.2 billion project for stadium upgrades, stadium renovations, or whatever. If you have $4.1 billion, or however the figure is you have, however much it is you have, why are you asking the state for $350 million when you have the money to do it by yourself? That's where I lost a lot of this a long time ago. When it comes to the Bengals and the Bengals fans, they're pushing for this from the state. Of course, it has to do because I guess it's part of this supposed bill that came out and included what the Browns wanted to do with their stadium and their relocation, asking for state funds, which apparently was approved. And now the Bengals and the Bengals fans are acting with their panties all up in the bunch because they felt left out in the cold. You missed the playoffs 3 of the last 5 years. No one's going to bail you out. Quit asking for a bailout. If you have the money, shut your mouths and take care of it yourselves. I've said this countless times, but nobody in Cincinnati wants to get it. If your value is $4 billion, as you said it is, as all these financial magazines or financial reports say they are, if you have that $4 billion like you say you do, and you want to make a $1.2 billion investment, why don't you just make it? I mean, $4 billion minus $1.2 billion is $2.8 billion. You're still going to have a positive value. But then again, as I said, if you're going to make this kind of an investment, why don't you just pony up a few extra $1 million and just build a new stadium from the ground up and quit going crazy over stadium renovations that basically are the equivalent of moving the gas gauge from to the end of the full button to on the full button, because it doesn't get you anywhere with stadium upgrades worth $350 million that you've been asking for the state. Basically, everyone affiliated says no one's going to support it. No one in the public is going to support it. And they're right. Why? Because it's going to cost taxpayer money. And Bengals fans have a problem with it because they want everyone to be a part of this organization that has been absolute poverty, or whatever the word you want to use, despite whatever the frick their record is. But good luck down the line. I still think you guys are going to renew your lease for 2 more years, which is going to take place, I believe, some point in June, because they have till June 30th to make the decision. Don't worry, they're not going anywhere, but just shut up about wanting $350 million to be bailed out when you don't have the balls to spend the money on your own. You bunch of useless tightwads over there in Cincinnati Bengal Nation, because if you want the upgrades, if you want value, you better spend the value, because if you don't spend the value, your value is going to be absolutely at a minus, and it's going to continue to plummet. And basically, that stadium is so outdated. I don't know if upgrades would do any favors at this point. I mean, I don't know why Bengals fans are so sick-headed, obsessed over wanting the state to help them out with $350 million. Why don't you all just put together a GoFundMe, give that $350 million to the stadium, and then have them do it on their own. Quit asking the state for a bailout. That's just ignorant. The things I have to tell about every single day about here in Cincinnati, I can make a show if I want to, but I'm not giving them the time of day. Now to the NBA. Actually, let's start with this one real quick because this came not too long ago. I think the guy wants more attention, so I'll give it. It was a season-ending presser today where the Mavs GM Nico Harrison, basically came out and said, I knew how close the fan base was with Luka Doncic when he was in Dallas. I didn't know it was that close. And when someone prompted to ask him the question, why shouldn't he be fired? He basically said, I'm doing a good job. At this point, you need to just take the microphone away from him, because the more he opens his mouth, the more of an idiot he looks, especially when it comes to this particular trade. Anybody with the brain knows the story behind this. I mean, it was so bad, even at some point, it came out that even Mavs head coach Jason Kidd said he didn't want this trade. I mean, he resented it because you're trading a generational talent. You're basically getting nothing in return. I mean, what do you have? I mean, Anthony Davis, granted, he's good when he wants to be, but the guy's spends half the season on the IR. But you just find ways to make yourself look like an idiot when you open your mouth when it comes to this particular trade. Why don't you just come out and just say the truth on why you really did it, instead of just beating around the bush and trying to make yourself look better than what you really are? Because at the end of the day, you're about to, at some point, you're going to wind up losing that GM job, rightfully so, and you're never going to get another NBA gig ever again. I mean, you just sent that trade out the door. Apparently, they hired someone under the training staff who has no experience. That didn't end well. Of course, you could forget, not too long ago, Kyrie Irving had the season-ending ACL injury. But at some point, Nico Harrison needs to just simply shut up and just go with the wind and just stay under the wraps, because anytime he opens his mouth, especially when it comes to this trade, he sounds worse and worse and worse with each passing day, each passing hour, and each passing minute. I don't know what the hell to tell him. He just finds a way to be stupidly stupid more and more each day. And just when you think he can't get any more stupid, he finds a way to be more stupid. That's Nico Harrison. And on the topic of Luka Doncic, comes out that the interview prior to the playoff game against Minnesota, he's basically was heartbroken that the trade happened. And of course, the Dallas fan base echoes it. There's something to be said about when you draft a player in any sport, whether it be the NBA, the NFL, baseball, hockey, soccer, whatever, where you can develop them as homegrown talent. It always has a special connection, more special than any athlete in all of sports. Where you can draft and grow your own from the ground up, like Dallas did with Luka Doncic. I can point to many examples in all sports. It feeds off and it rubs the electricity the positive way, and basically the love there is almost second to none, especially when you talk about international superstars that are from the ground up. I mean, Dallas went through that with Dirk Nowitzki before they did it with Luka Doncic. I can point to the connection the San Antonio community had with Manu Ginobili from Argentina when he was from the ground up there. I mean, the same special treatment there. The soccer players that come from overseas to play in Major League Soccer from other countries, the connection there. NFL, some of the franchise players, when that starts from the ground up and starts to establish themselves and go from start to finish, it's always special when you have homegrown talent. And when this trade happened with Dallas, something was broken. And what happened was Luka Doncic, who felt like he was at home with a great fan base in Dallas, because I'll say this honestly, as a Spurs fan out of knowledge, Dallas fan base with their players like Dirk Nowitzki and Luka Doncic, their loyalty to them is second to none. I will give them that. I mean, it's what it was during Dirk Nowitzki's prime, and it was during Luka Doncic's time before the trade happened. And when this happened, Luka felt like he was like kicked out of his own house that he built and was basically just sent out the door. And it seemed like it really hurt him because apparently he threw a cell phone across the room and it was basically broken. Apparently it was turned back to him before the interview. But there's something to say about homegrown talent from the ground up when you draft and develop it from the bottom up and become, the standout in the history of a respective franchise. The special connection that takes place always means more where you can do it within your own organization from the ground up. And when that trade happened, because of the connection Luka felt with the Dallas Mavericks community and the fans and vice versa, that was broken, not just for Luka Doncic. You can see in his eyes every time he talks about it. It almost like it breaks him, but also the Dallas fan base who has called for, protests and, don't buy tickets and a whole bunch of stuff for obvious reasons and understandably so. Simply because that's the connection and they come to see a particular player, especially homegrown talent, generational talent like Luka Doncic. And when that happens, it's broken. The trust is broken. Everything is broken. And it's basically beyond unrepairable. So Luka moves on. The Dallas fan base, he was calling for Nico's head. Of course, they were chanting "Fire Nico" at a couple of their games, rightfully and understandably so. It's going to happen, not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And when that happens, maybe Dallas can find a way to find another piece of talent from the ground up that can be generational, like they had with Doncic and Dirk Nowitzki, among some of the others, and get back to that prominence once again. Because I say this as a Spurs fan, Dallas always stays loyal to their teams, especially way back in the early 90s, mid-90s, when they were the welcome mats of the NBA before Nowitzki came along. And the rest of the history there. And speaking of his new team, the Los Angeles Lakers, they got beat down like a drum by the Minnesota Timberwolves Saturday night. It was simply because when they made the trade, Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis, the interior was open, and Jalen McDaniel, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid just went haywire and basically just demolished the Lakers from start to finish. I mean, you traded Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic, of course, because of stature and cap reasons. I get it. But when you trade an elite big man and you don't replace him with anything of significance, that is what's going to happen. And it happened in game one. Randall, Jalen McDaniel, who shot the cover off the ball, and Naz Reid just went in there and just did damage anytime they wanted to. And the crazy thing is Anthony Edwards didn't play all that great either. He wound up having 22 points, but the game was over early when the Timberwolves just pounded it inside. But a poignant moment late in the game where once again we're having a conversation about LeBron James just wanted to have an acting job where he barely touches Julius Randle, falls down, acts like the world is out to get him and he's going to be on the floor acting dead. I mean, Julius Randle's reaction was priceless. While the Timberwolves are going down scoring, LeBron James is complaining about the officiating, per usual. And now we're having this. And the Los Angeles Lakers were a heavy favorite going into this series. Remember, they just had the Luka Doncic trade. If you lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round after the Luka Doncic trade, just as bad as it is for Dallas on their end, it's going to be worse for the Lakers on their end because you didn't trade for Luka Doncic to have a first-round exit to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, it is possible now because I know Minnesota was hit and miss for the most of the season, got down to the 6th seed, but you lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round with Luka Doncic and LeBron after everything you gave up to get them. It's going to be just as bad for Rob Pelinka as it is for Nico Harrison, and there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be asked. Now, they're going to say Luka's more the future as opposed to the present. I get it, but you don't trade for a top 7 NBA player, a generational talent like Luka Doncic, so you can be eliminated in the first round by the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's going to be embarrassing if that happens, which at this point, it looks likely. I mean, because the crazy part is Anthony Edwards hasn't even scratched the surface, and he's still Mike Conley on that roster, and he didn't do anything. You just got punked by Naz Reid and Jalen McDaniels and Julius Randle. I don't expect those three to play the way they did the rest of the series, but you play like that, you're fixing to be a first-round exit, and it's not going to be pretty for out there in L.A. because you didn't trade for Luka Doncic just to be a first-round fodder to the Minnesota Timberwolves. You trade them to at least try and get to the conference finals, most likely against Oklahoma City. But if you don't even get out of the first round with LeBron and Luka on that roster, I don't care how the makeup of the roster is. You have those two players, and you don't get out of the first round against Minnesota, it's going to be a long, long off season for you guys in LA. You better force the envelope of getting out of the first round. Otherwise, the trade's going to be bad on their end just as much as it is on Dallas's end. Good luck the rest of the way against Minnesota. It's not going to be an easy series the rest of the way. And on to a further topic of the NBA playoffs. This took place yesterday. This was during the Memphis, Oklahoma City game. This is Ja Morant. We know what he's gone through the last few years. We know his maturity level is not the greatest, as we all know, for an adult who's 25 years old. I get it, he's young. But he was caught on camera just laughing, smiling, and being happy in a game where they were losing by as much as 55 points. Why would you be smiling in a game you're losing by 55 points? It's one thing when an end-of-the-bench guy does it. When you have the face of your franchise, who granted has maturity issues, laughing at the prospect of losing a game by 55 points, and they're on the losing end of this, I tell you. You're laughing at a time where you're losing by 55 points. It is not a good look, especially when we talk about a star player like Ja Morant, who I can say is a top 10 to top 15 talent in the NBA. I mean, the kid's talented, no doubt. You're getting your heads handed to you and then some by the Thunder, especially in garbage time with that depth that Oklahoma City has, piling that big lead, bigger, and bigger, and your star guy sitting on the bench laughing at it. It's not a good look for Memphis. Now, of course, it didn't help when they fired Taylor Jenkins before the season ended, which is also a bad look for them. But this is even worse. Why would you comprehend laughing as a top guy when your team is getting just roasted and then some, losing by nearly 60 points, and your top guy sitting on the bench laughing? That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, there's a few guys at the end of that bench. I'm sure they're probably letting Ja Morant have it, especially some of the veterans who have been there, done that. Because when you get hammered by 50 points, it's one of the most humiliating and embarrassing things that could happen to you. And it doesn't help the humiliation and embarrassment when your star guy, Ja Morant, acts the way he did during the blowout loss. To simply act like that is just absolutely unbelievable. Well, they're not going to beat the Thunder anyways. I called a Thunder sweep before the series started because I think Oklahoma City just has a better team all around. Of course, the standout Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They could go far as long as the body of Chet Holmgren holds up because we know he hasn't been the most healthiest. But when he's on the court, He's productive. He showed it yesterday. Isaiah Hartenstein, solid acquisition in the offseason, being a solid contributor to that team. That Oklahoma City team is loaded. Bring out the brooms. The sweep is coming. That series is over. Thunder to move on to the next round. And of course, this week, we know what this week is in the NFL. It is NFL draft week. You know, all the freaking rumors is going to be coming around. All the stories will be coming about with who's going to draft who's going to move up, who's going to move down. And we have the idiots, especially in Cincinnati, who have nothing better to do with their lives, coughing up mock drafts, putting on live shows saying who are they going to draft number 17. Quit worrying about who they draft 17. Let the Bengals dictate that. And it's going to be news all over the place. Real interesting story is who's going to take Alshon Jeffrey, the standout from Boise State. You know who set all the freaking rush numbers over there. Talking about him going to Jacksonville, the Raiders. Bears hoping he falls further to them. Cowboys hope they can fall to 12. I don't think he gets out of the top 8. But the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, basically said if he's at number 6, we're going to take him. Understandably so, because their general manager, John Spytek, is a believer that drafting a running back in the first round is the way to go. Then again, I wasn't expecting Bijan Robinson to be drafted the position he was in 2 years ago. And look what he's done out there in Atlanta. I mean, I don't know if Alshon Jeffrey can have that kind of talent, especially early. Of course, all depends on where he goes, the situation. But I'm appalled how many people want to see where Alshon Jeffrey is going. A lot of people have him in that top 6 or 7. I've never been one to say take a running back in the first round because we saw it here in Cincinnati in 1995 when Kijana Carter was drafted, blew his ACL, and the party was over. So whoever drafts him better wrap him up in a bubble wrap or something, because I'm not sure where you're going to go with it. I mean, he's a standout running back who I think will help a team. Is he that kind of an impactful running back? We're going to find out. In fact, teams are thinking about drafting him in the top 10 or 15 is a bit of a head scratcher because I've never been a proponent of drafting running backs that high. Then again, as I said, I wasn't expecting Bijan Robinson to be gone in the 8th overall to Atlanta. I think also, if I'm correct, later in the first round or early second, Jahmyr Gibbs was drafted to Detroit, and we've seen the job he done with David Montgomery as that 1-2 punch with the Lions, balancing that awesome offense over there in Detroit with the receiving core they have there. But we'll see where Alshon Jeffrey goes. Probably somewhere in the 6, 7, 8 bracket. If he goes to the Raiders, they probably take him. Of course, the number 1 pick overall, in my opinion, unless something catastrophic happens, Cam Ward's going to Tennessee. I still think the Browns should take Abdul Carter in the 2nd pick overall over Travis Hunter, because I said pound for pound, Abdul Carter is the best player in the draft. Travis Hunter, you could probably say, has the most talent, but Carter showed more consistency with his stance. And picture him opposite Myles Garrett on the edge for the Browns, just doing damage to offensive lines, because you can't double team off of anybody if they get Carter opposite Myles Garrett. That's a heck of a defensive duo. Of course, he could fall to the Giants at 3rd, who has a deep defensive front line themselves. After number 1, this is probably the most unpredictable NFL draft I could probably recall in decades, because nothing is a sure thing after number 1. I mean, back in the day, it was number 1. Number 2, you found out as the day before the draft starts. Number 3, that starts to leak. But from the 2nd pick down, so much uncertainty, so many question marks as to what teams will want to do or what they're going to do. Fasten your seatbelts, because the NFL draft this week is going to be absolutely wild when the day comes later this week. Of course, big news out of Philly is the extension to Cam Jurgens, 4 years in the $60 million range, $39 million guaranteed. The biggest thing here with Philly, they solidify that offensive front. You talk about Jordan Mailata at the left tackle position. Left guard, you have Landon Dickinson. Of course, you have Jurgens in the middle. And the standout, Lane Johnson at the right guard position, where they're going to be solid for the next couple years, and they're firmly pat. If you have an offensive franchise quarterback, Cincinnati Bengals, take notes. That's how you take care of your franchise quarterback. We've seen Kansas City do it for the longest time when they picked up Joe Thuney before he was traded, Trey Smith, and Creed Humphrey. Of course, they had issues with the left tackle position last season. We've seen Baltimore starting to do that with Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum. And now we're seeing it here with Philadelphia with Jordan Mailata, Jordan Dickinson, Cam Jurgens, and Lane Johnson. You have a franchise quarterback, invest in an offensive line that can protect them. Cincinnati Bengals, take notes. That's how you protect your franchise quarterback. You build around it. You build a wall to protect it. Think about all the years, the great offensive line Tom Brady's had in New England. That'd be a perfect example. Joe Montana had it in San Francisco. Dan Marino had one in Miami. Patrick Mahomes had for the longest time in Kansas City. And, of course, maybe a few others also. That's how you invest in protecting a franchise quarterback. You spend the dollars on the necessary parts. And that's what the Philadelphia Eagles did. Jalen Hurts is going to be fine in the pocket for the next couple years because that side is stable and stabilized very well. Now, they probably have to get a couple depth pieces dumber down the line. But shout out to Howie Roseman for doing the job to protect their franchise investment. That is Jalen Hurts coming off the Super Bowl. And they'll probably be among the favorites to get there again. Have to go through some AFC teams like Buffalo, Kansas City, and Baltimore. But they'll be there. They could be an NFC, they could be an NFC representative back-to-back if all the cards fall their way. They have the talent to get there. They have some pieces to fill up. But that's how you invest in an offensive line to protect your major investment, which is a franchise quarterback. You know, Hurts part of the 2020 draft class with Burrow, Tua, and Justin Herbert. And now he's a Super Bowl winner. So now put the offensive line together. He's going to be living fine for the next couple years. Of course, the biggest one here is the potential trade of Kirk Cousins. A lot of places he can go to. Rumors were not too long ago he was in Cleveland. I don't think he was in there in Cleveland to get to check out the Deshaun Watson spa masseuse. I think he was there for other reasons. So, but the Atlanta Falcons, per usual, fouled that one up simply because they drafted Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall after they signed Kirk Cousins to that deal the year he came off the ACL injury in Minnesota. And now we have another mess at the quarterback position over in Atlanta. Because where are they going to go now? Good luck trying to trade for this guy because he really fell off the map other than the 2 games against Tampa Bay last season. Didn't necessarily play all that great. What the asking price is going to be, who knows? It'll probably be a little bit stiff, but it's going to probably take a lot of trickery because of the contract Atlanta signed him to. The word all around is he might go to Cleveland. Who knows? But Atlanta did this to themselves when they not only they signed Cousins to the longer-term contract after the ACL injury, but drafting Michael Penix Jr., which didn't sit well with Kirk Cousins, as he openly admitted. They didn't like the idea of having a quarterback after he was signed, thinking Cousins was going to be the guy moving forward. They drafted Penix. At some point, they sat Cousins and played Penix some snaps, showed some signs of what he did, especially at the University of Washington. They have some nice targets out there, especially when you talk about Greg Langdon, the tight end. I can't think of his name. I'll come back to it. The tight end Kyle Pitts, and of course the stand-up running back Bijan Robinson. But Atlanta has work to do, and they seem like they're going to move forward with Penix Jr. There's a reason why he took him 8th overall. I mean, might as well just use him. But don't sign another franchise quarterback with the kind of contract you signed Kirk Cousins to after you trade him, because then you look real foolish. Good luck with that one, Atlanta. You already screwed that one up last draft, and who knows what we're going to do this draft to screw it up even more. That's the Atlanta Falcons way. A lot of news going to the NFL. I'm telling you, I've never seen the draft this wild in quite some time. Because I said outside of Cam Ward to Tennessee, who knows who's going where? Who knows who's going to move up? Who's going to move down? Who's going to get extra draft picks? Who's going to be traded? Because even the speculation again is here in Cincinnati is they might deal Trey Hendrickson for more picks. Who knows? But it's going to be adventurous next 72 hours before Thursday, 8 p.m. gets here with the NFL draft. And I will have my mock draft later this week, not in terms of the players, but in terms of team needs. And Thursday at 5 p.m., I will be live in Cincinnati to do my own preview show. Looking forward to it. On to a little wrestling note. Of course, over the weekend, it was the WWE Hall of Fame. I don't talk wrestling much, but I have a lot of wrestling followers. But I think a poignant moment needs to be discussed because this guy earned his stripes the hard way after his career was over. Is none other than Lawrence Wendell Fall, a.k.a. Lex Luger, the narcissist, the All-American, the total package. Career itself is self-explanatory. Was in the NFL for a while. Basically, was a walk-on to the Memphis territory, where he met of course, the flamboyant Ric Flair. Flair makes him look like $1 million in his first match, and then tells Jim Crockett to have him signed. You know where his career went back and then. Learned the hard way how to work as a wrestler. Went to the WWE. You know what happened in the SummerSlam in '93 against Yokozuna. Goes back to WCW unannounced to spark the Monday Night Wars in the mid to late '90s, where it was like a booming time for the industry. Of course, catapulted with the title win in '97. And of course, after WCW was spot and sold to WWE, his life out of control, alcohol, drugs, jail, coming back out, wound up into a massive rehabs, trying to become spiritual, trended upward. Of course, in 2007, on a plane headed to San Francisco, suffered the paralysis. The wrestling community sort of distanced themselves from Lex Luger for the longest time because the perception was because of his ties with the standout Miss Elizabeth, real name Elizabeth Hulette, was, of course, died in Lex Luger's home due to an overdose. The feeling was, perception-wise, that Lex was the one that, killed her, perception-wise, which anybody knows Liz is an adult woman who makes her own mistakes. Lex said himself countless times that he takes responsibility in terms of being a bad influence because he himself was deeply hooked on alcohol and drugs. But I said a few weeks ago when he was officially announced, and the conclusion was yesterday, that this more has to do with what he's become as, time goes by, which shows time does heal all wounds. Even Lex Luger has not up to own his sins, and massive kudos to him. And to see him stand up off that wheelchair to give a speech, it was basically eye-opening, mind-blowing, and just nothing but a positive thing. I mean, you can say all you want about him as a worker and how he was a standoffish guy. By his own admission, he admitted it. But I said this, what happened Saturday night when he was officially inducted was more has to do with the inspiration he came after his career was over and the demons he had to battle to get to that point. You wish it didn't end up in paralysis or anything else, for many reasons. I get it. But you wish that no one had to go through what he did just to get to that point. But as time wore on, the wrestling community, especially the WWE community, started to accept Lex Luger back. And time after time, as all the wounds started to heal, the day finally came where he got his rightful place in the Hall of Fame. And I've always said, we talk about those Monday Night Wars in the mid to late 90s. He was the one that sparked it when he showed up at the Nitro debut in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with that shirt that had both Steve Borden, a.k.a. Sting, and Ric Flair looking at him like, what is he doing here? Because nobody outside of Lex Luger and Eric Bischoff knew about this. I mean, he wanted to go back. Bischoff didn't want him back for many reasons. And Lex Luger, when he came back, learned how to work, learned how to become a great worker. Bischoff admitted he had to earn it the hard way, and he did it, got a new contract. And at the end of the day, that's how the war started. And after what he went through after his career was over, we finally got to see the vindication for him. That really the tipping point of his life was Saturday when he went to the Hall of Fame. And it happened his wrestling career, second to none, well documented, well chronicled. But it more had to do with how he basically worked himself to become a better human being after his career was over, especially when he found himself spiritually. He said the calendar date was April 23rd, 2006, and managed to become influential in helping people not get to that point that he did and teach others to do things that Lex Luger wished he was able to do in his younger years. So now he's an inspiration in that regard. He's a mentor in that regard. And because he was able to re-elevate himself to a point where he can be accepted in the wrestling community again, Saturday night was a tipping point when he was able to get off that wheelchair, working with Diamond Dallas Page and that DDP yoga that he has going on down there, and to be able to give a Hall of Fame speech says a whole lot about what he's become now. That was where I think the final came through when he was officially inducted, when Cody Rhodes presented it to him. This is an awesome thing for him. And those who are watching in this part of town, if you see him, pat him on the back and tell him good job, because he's just been nothing short of inspirational ever since he went through what he went through in the early part of the 2000s after his wrestling career was basically over at that point. I mean, it was just unreal what he had gone through. So kudos to Lawrence Fowl, a.k.a. Lex Luger, the narcissist, the total package, the All-American, well-earned, well-deserved. Keep trending on the upward climb, because you're just an inspiration now, and everybody loves you and looks forward to seeing you more. And the way they were chanting Luger's name at the Hall of Fame speech was absolutely goosebumpy, because it gave me goosebumps. Glad to see him get his just due. Now to historical nights in the world of boxing. I said not too long ago, I focused on the historical perspective, and we're going to talk about a few moments. Actually, one thing I want to touch on before I get into that, it was announced that the fight between Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda is taking place. No date's been officially set. Yeah, I think it's July 12th. Part of a co-main event card they have going over there. Can't think of the city of where. About to find out how great Shakur Stevenson can be. I mean, he showed it against Oscar Valdez when he just demolished Valdez, but hasn't been anything close to it ever since. But he has the talent. He's got to start to show it, because William Zepeda is no pushover. What I find interesting is he let go of Turk Al-Sheikh as a promoter to sign with Lou DiBella. Let me remind you, Lou DiBella was Tevin Farmer's promoter in his 2 fights with William Zepeda, and he probably saw something that Shakur Stevenson liked, and that's why Stevenson went there. Because remember, Tevin Farmer in the 2 fights against William Zepeda gave Zepeda everything he can handle in those 2 fights. First one, you could argue Farmer won. Second fight could have gone either way, but I thought Zepeda was the right winner. Now we get the fight we've wanted to see for about the last year and a half, and that is Stevenson versus Zepeda. To me, it's a pick-em fight. A lot of people think Stevenson's going to be a bigger favorite, which I don't know if I go that far. He'd probably be my pick to win at the moment, but we're going to see just how great he can be, because in recent fights, we know he's been absolutely tentative when it comes to the ability to throw punches. So I'll look forward to that fight on July 12th, because it's one of the ones I wanted to see for a little while, and now we're going to get it. Now to the historical aspect. Lots of history to touch on today. First one, of course, is it was on this day the world was introduced to Alexis Arguello. Of course, the unfortunate tragedy with him in 2009. Decade-awaited career, 3-division world champion, wins over standout fighters like Alfredo Escalera twice, Ruben Castillo, Jose Luis Ramirez, Ray Mancini, Kevin Rooney, among many others. Had a terrific 2-fight series with Aaron Pryor when he tried to win the championship at 140. But the standout Alexis Arguello would have been 72 today had he been around. Al Magnificifo Leavo, a.k.a. the Thin Magnificent Man, simply was magnificent, and that's being a little soft, because we talk about some of the most beautiful fighters to watch at that time. Alexis Arguello was probably the master of his craft. The case of when he threw, he hit. When he hit, he did damage, because that's what he did. Especially when you pull up the replay when he just pasted Kevin Rooney down to the canvas, and the beating he had given to Ray Mancini as that fight wore on till the fight was stopped in the 15th round. Just an electric, all-time great, a kind gentleman in and out of the ring. I mean, the crazy thing is, after he beat Mancini, he goes up to Mancini in the interview and says, the best gift you have is your father. Anything I can do to help you and your father, come to me. Says a lot about who Alexis Arguello was in and out of the ring. Of course, spent a lot of time as a Nicaraguan, had to move out due to the war circumstances out of there, unfortunately. But from the back end of the 70s to the early to mid-80s, you're talking about one of the standout big men south of the middleweight division, especially in the featherweight and super featherweight divisions, where he reigned supreme for the longest time. Just a beauty to watch. Reigned supreme, 3-division world champion at a time when winning 3-division world titles was something of significance. And that's what Alexis Arguello did. His legacy is second to none. We talk about him among the Latino fighters, all-time greats. The only guy I put ahead of him is Roberto Duran, obviously so. But he's right there with guys like Salvador Sanchez, Julio Cesar Chavez, Felix Trinidad, Wilfredo Gomez, and Wilfred Benitez, among the many others. But a standout fighter during his time was Alexis Arguello. Just a beauty to watch. For a guy who was built like basically like the equivalent of your pinky and ring fingers, the guy could deliver a hit, and he was explosive with his hands when he delivered because he was very economical with his punches, and when he threw them, he landed. He always was in the 50% margin in terms of the CompuBox stats, which means he wasn't wasting any punches, and when he hit you, he was doing damage. I encourage everyone to look up his knockout of Kevin Rooney when he pasted him on the canvas, and Rooney was basically looked like he was dead. I mean, that's how great Alexis Arguello was. May God rest the soul of Alexis Arguello. Standout all-time great. And it was 39 years ago yesterday that a rematch that took place that had all kinds of historical significance, had all kinds of hoopla before, during, and after. And of course, the after was known by one of the all-time famous interviews in HBO boxing history. It was a rematch between Michael Spinks and Larry Holmes. Their first fight had all kinds of history to it. I mean, Larry Holmes was 48-0. Looking to tie Rocky Marciano's record. Michael Spinks was defeated, looking to become the first light heavyweight champ to win the heavyweight championship, which he did in the first fight by a unanimous decision. And Michael Spinks did the smart thing, not let Larry Holmes do his thing, simply because Larry Holmes was a naturally bigger man. You know, Larry Holmes trying to make the history to break Marciano's record, or at least tie it. Holmes got the decision lost to Spinks. And now we fast forward to the rematch. This was in the middle of the unification tournament that Don King put together to try and crown one champion at some point, because we know the political aspect of the sport of boxing. It was all over the place. And so what happens when we get this? It was an end result of the fact that you could probably argue this was not necessarily a robbery, but one of the questionable decisions that came out of it, because Larry Holmes came out better with better intent, because he did not let Michael Spinks get off the way Spinks did in the first fight. And as the fight was wearing on, Larry Holmes was starting to take control of the fight. Although Michael Spinks did have his moments, it was from the rounds 10 through 15, where every time Holmes started to hit Spinks, you started to see Spinks hurt and wobble. And as a decision came about, Michael Spinks was granted a split decision win that set uproars all over the Las Vegas Hilton in Las Vegas, because people thought Larry Holmes was victimized. I wouldn't put in the upper tier robberies of some of the ones I've seen in my time, but Larry Holmes does have a strong case. I thought he won the fight, although I wouldn't call it the highway robbery some people claim it to be. But Larry Holmes, I thought, should have been given the decision. And for those of you who remember this fight, know him for the post-fight interview he gave on HBO after the fight, where he said to other judges, the referees, the promoters, "Kiss me where the sun don't shine. HBO, that's my big black leap." I think you can guess the word. Larry Holmes always had this chip on his shoulder after Ali, because the public didn't accept him. Well, what hard for him to fill the shoes that Ali left behind. Of course, didn't help his cause when he pummeled him October 2nd, 1980, in a fight that had no business taking place. But he did reign for 7.5 years as the heavyweight champion, defended it 20 times, top 10 all-time great heavyweight, whether the boxing intelligentsia likes it or not. He's certainly up there. Granted, some of the words he would use after fights or before fights rub people off the wrong way, especially when it comes to after this fight. But, you know, he never could become what Ali was. He was more blue-collar than Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson or whatever, because he always had this ideology of wanting to do things the right way, wanting to work hard, and that's what Larry Holmes did. You don't reign 7.5 years and make 20 successful title defenses and just become a nobody overnight. And that's what Larry Holmes did. Of course, it ended the first fight with Spinks. After this fight, he would announce his retirement until Mike Tyson camp made an offer to him to come back. You know the story there. Mike Tyson demolishes him in 4 rounds. Basically, Holmes admitted he didn't train for the fight. He came for the paycheck. Later revealed that an extra $500,000 was given to him so he wouldn't train. He would take another couple years off, come back in the early 90s, upset Ray Mercer in 1992 in a turn back the hands of time performance to get him another title shot against Evander Holyfield, which he acquitted himself well. But that's a Larry Holmes legacy. Unfortunate thing is, he became after Ali and before the 90s heavyweights of Holyfield, Foreman, Douglas, Bowe, Lewis, Mercer, Morrison. And he was stuck in the middle. And that was something Larry tried to fight every which way he could and couldn't. But it still does not deter the fact he's easily maybe a top 6 or top 7 all-time great heavyweight. But I understand his gripe that he was victimized 39 years ago in this rematch with Michael Spinks, because I thought he won the fight. I wouldn't call it the highway robbery. Some close rounds, especially in the middle. But for Michael Spinks, after this fight, he basically just dropped the belt because he didn't want any contractual obligations with Don King, because it was going to eventually set him up with a big super fight in 1988 against Mike Tyson. But he dropped the belt to avoid a mandatory due to not wanting to fulfill any contractual obligations. And the misfortune with Spinks is he'll be remembered as Mike Tyson's victim in 91 seconds on June 27, 1988, which is a crying shame, because you're talking about his legacy as light heavyweight, probably a top 5 or top 6 in that division. We talk about guys like Ezra Charles, Billy Conn, Archie Moore, Bob Foster, and among many others, Tommy Loughran. Throwing a Gene Tunney in there, Harry Greb. Michael Spinks was up there as a light heavyweight, but unfortunately, the modern intelligentsia, or whatever you want to call it, is always going to remember him for just being blown out in 91 seconds. But even his own admission, Michael Spinks said he just cashed out on what turned out to be a $15.5 million payday. Didn't want to just give it to any promoter or have any liability. So he took the $15 million, and like Marvin Hagler the year before, he got out and stayed out, knew when the time was coming, and he stayed out and stayed away from the sport forever. So, but Michael Spinks is definitely an all-time great at light heavyweight. Had the 2 wins over Holmes, vacated the belt. He avoided Tony Tucker to fight Jerry Cooney. They had another fight in the middle before the super fight with Mike Tyson in 88. But his place in history is secure also. Everyone needs to chill with this whole Tyson thing, because he never was going to beat Mike Tyson. His legacy will always be at the light heavyweight division, where he's probably a top 5 or 6 in that division all time. And I conclude on another historical night. This one took place in Atlantic City. This one was a case of farce turned fight, and basically this is a night where everybody won. This was Evander Holyfield and George Foreman for the heavyweight title. At a time when people called George Foreman's comeback a joke, a fraud, a scam, or whatever, he gets the title shot against Evander Holyfield simply because the Mike Tyson thing wasn't coming up the way it wanted. So Holyfield takes Foreman in the interim. This was weeks after Mike Tyson beat Razor Ruddock and was named the #1 contender. The story with this is, even though Evander Holyfield won easily 10 of the rounds, I mean, he won this fight going away, unanimous decision, rightfully so. In his own weird way, George Foreman won the night because everybody thought he was a fraud to begin with, basically shut everybody up and turned that fight into a legitimate heavyweight championship fight when it was perceived to be a circus before the fight. But George Foreman, even though he only won 2 or maybe 3 of the rounds tops, acquitted himself quite well, showed a courage and persistence, getting rocked with 15, 16, 17 punch combinations that floor usually any heavyweight. But he was still upstanding. He was still hammering his bombs. And of course, Holyfield would get the decision. But Foreman basically validated his comeback as something of legitimacy on this particular night, simply because he wouldn't give in to Evander Holyfield. Of course, 3 years later, Foreman would regain the title against Michael Moore. But you can point to this night against Evander Holyfield as to why that happened, because now he became a top contender. He became a top heavyweight in the second incarnation of his career. He was still trying to chase the ghost of Muhammad Ali, which from that night in Kinshasa, Zaire, October 30th, 1974, was still in his mind. Even he admitted it countless times. And was able to come back, split a couple fights until the Moore fight, and he won the heavyweight title and made history. Evander Holyfield after this fight, got the signed contract with Mike Tyson in November of 91. Of course, Mike Tyson fakes the rib injury and, of course, winds up in prison for whatever he wound up in prison for, because he didn't know how to keep it in his pants. And when it comes to women, that's the Mike Tyson way. Comes out, and we finally get Holyfield Tyson in 96, where Holyfield just beats the brakes off of him, and despite all the crazy allegations from the Mike Tyson camp. And that was all she wrote for that fight. And Holyfield's place in history secure. Both fighters, Holyfield and Foreman, top 8 all-time great heavyweights. I mean, you can say when Foreman regained the title, he probably put himself in the top 5. I mean, just regained his stature. Evander Holyfield, maybe, of course, probably say carried on longer than he should. I thought his time should have been done when he lost to Lennox Lewis a second time. Definitely the top 7 or 8. In the cruiserweight division, top 2 with Alexander Usyk. Standout fights. All-time great heavyweight himself. You're talking about 2 gladiators, 2 warriors who had no fear, extreme confidence, and extreme belief. And they showed it on this night, April 19, 1991. It's just, Evander Holyfield was just the right winner because he just threw many more rallies. I mean, there were times around 7 and 9 where he was hitting with 15, 16 punches consecutively flush, and Foreman was still upright, barely even moved. And of course, Holyfield later admitted that George Foreman was the hardest puncher he fought. There was a time he even said he went to the corner and wondered if his teeth was still there because that's how hard George Foreman hit. To tell you about the pure power of what George Foreman had. And this particular night, I said, everybody won. And the people who called George Foreman's comeback a fraud, basically silenced because he did everything he could to win the fight. He just met a terrifically skilled fighter, the real deal, Evander Holyfield. And on that night, he showed why, among he did many, many times. But may God rest the soul of George Foreman. Never thought I would come on a show to say something like that. But their place in history is secure also. At a time when the 90s started to get hot, Foreman in his second incarnation found himself in the middle of everything, which is something no one could foresee when he came back in 87. But when he lost to Holyfield, everything changed, and that's what cultivated to when he won the title from Michael Moore in 1994. Just a terrific second incarnation. You never see athletes have 2 careers with a big time layoff in the middle like George Foreman did. I mean, his first career, the punching machine where he obliterated Joe Frazier. The second comeback, he was more technical and economical with his punches. But the last thing to go in a fighter, as we know, is his punch. And he still had the punch when he came back. Ask Michael Moore, he can tell you all about it. And that's what made George Foreman successful in his second tenure. But the biggest thing with Foreman, it was basically the same thing with Holyfield also. Why those 2 were successful, you could never beat the belief out of them. They had it up here in their mind. They were mentally strong, mentally tough, and strongly confident they can lick anyone they wanted to. That's why they had the success they had throughout their careers. Shout out to both of them. May God rest the soul of George Foreman. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I hope everyone had themselves a wonderful rest of the day. Hope everyone takes care of themselves. As always, make self-care your number 1 priority in life. Take care of yourself first before you take care of anything else. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Take care of yourself first. Good things come your way. Have a good rest of your night. Take care, and God bless.